Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Munir Vivakshur Bhagavad Gunanam Sakapite Bharatam Aha Krishnaha Yasmin Nirnang Gramya Sukhanuvadair Matir Grihita Nuhare Kathayam. Sri Vidura said, O great sage Maitreya, your friend, the great sage Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas, has already described the transcendental qualities of the Lord in his great epic known as the Maha-Bharata. But the whole idea is to draw the attention of the mass of people to Krishna Katha in the form of Bhagavad Gita through their strong affinity for hearing mundane topics. Maha-Bharata, Part 1, Chapter 13, Arjuna's Pilgrimage. It was more than a year since the visit of Narada Rishi. The Pandavas' power and influence had increased, and they had brought many other kings under their sway. They ruled with one aim: to keep the people on a path of piety and truth. By their own example, they showed how happiness follows a life of virtue. In everything the Pandavas did, they accepted the guidance of spiritually advanced Brahmanas. Indraprastha flourished and became more than the equal of Hastinapur in the eyes of the world. Due to his unswerving adherence to virtue, Yudhishthir became known as Dharmaraj, the king of religion. Draupadi, meanwhile, pleased her 5 husbands with her feminine graces and expert attentions. According to their agreement, each of the brothers was allotted time in which to be alone with her. One day it so happened that while Draupadi was alone with Yudhishthir, a Brahmana came to the Pandavas' palace. Standing by the gate, he cried out, O king, a Brahmana's wealth is being robbed by wicked and despicable men. Alas, how can it be that in the kingdom of the virtuous Pandavas, the Brahmanas are not protected? The king who takes his taxes but fails to protect the people is considered the most sinful of men. O heroes, take me by the hand and deliver me from this burning anguish. In anger and grief, the Brahmana repeatedly cried out. Arjuna heard his cries and called down, Do not fear! Arjuna went quickly to fetch his weapons in order to punish the thieves. But Arjuna discovered that Yudhishthir was alone with Draupadi in the room which held the weapons chest. Arjuna hesitated. How could he intrude upon his elder brother, especially as they had made their special agreement? But at the same time, here was an afflicted Brahmana. If Arjuna did not protect him, then Yudhishthir's fame would perish and he would be tainted by sin. Arjuna could not simply stand by and watch his brother be accused of irreligion. Arjuna had to get the weapons, even though it meant he would probably be exiled to the forest. Arjuna felt that even if he died in the forest, that would be preferable to being covered by sin. Arjuna then resolved to enter the chamber and gather his weapons. He knocked on the door and then walked in. Looking straight ahead of him, Arjuna strode quickly toward the weapons. Yudhishthir smiled to see his younger brother. He knew Arjuna must have had an important reason for entering. Arjuna then explained the situation, took his bow, and then rushed out of the palace. Taking the Brahmana and mounting his chariot, Arjuna pursued the robbers. When he saw them in the distance, Arjuna released infallible arrows, striking down the thieves as they made off with the Brahmana's cows. Having dealt swift justice to the robbers, Arjuna restored the property to the grateful Brahmana and then returned to the city. Yudhishthir greeted his brother warmly as he entered the palace. Along with his other brothers, Yudhishthir applauded Arjuna for saving the Brahmana. Arjuna bowed before Yudhishthir and then spoke. "O my lord, please give me permission to observe the vow as we have agreed. I shall now leave for the forest at once." Yudhishthir's heart was pierced with grief when he heard Arjuna's statement. He replied immediately, "Why should you go, O sinless one? If I am indeed your authority, then heed my words now. I was not in the least disturbed by your entering the room, so there is no need for you to leave for the forest." Yudhishthir looked tearfully at his handsome, curly-haired brother. How could he face separation from this virtuous and gentle soul? "My dear Arjuna, Scripture sanctions a younger brother entering a room where his elder brother sits with his wife. It is only when the elder brother intrudes upon the younger that it is condemned. You entered the room only in pursuance of duty and in service to me. No, my lord, I have heard from you that virtue must be practiced without hesitation or quibble, and I shall not waver from truth. Truth is my weapon, and virtue is my strength. So please grant me permission to leave, and I shall proceed to the forest today." Despite repeated pleas from the other Pandava brothers, Arjuna could still not be swayed. Finally, Yudhishthir relented and gave his permission. Although it would be painful to think of his younger brother in exile for so long, it must somehow or the other be the arrangement of providence. Surely the Lord had some inscrutable purpose which would ultimately prove to their benefit. Yudhishthir watched sadly as Arjuna left the city, accompanied by Brahmanas chanting sacred hymns and by servants carrying wealth for him to distribute as charity while he traveled. The young prince went on foot towards the north. Arjuna had decided to first follow the course of the Ganga toward the Himalayas and then proceed eastward to the coast. Following the coastline in a great circle, Arjuna would finally return to Indraprastha. Arjuna traveled at a leisurely pace. He saw charming woodlands, lakes, and gardens. There were countless hermitages along the banks of the Ganga where sages lived. And each evening, Arjuna would stop and recite prayers in their company. Arjuna would also listen as the sages narrated tales from the ancient scriptures about the pastimes of the Supreme Lord in his many various incarnations. Arjuna often thought of his cousin and dear friend Krishna as Arjuna walked. He hoped to visit Krishna toward the end of his exile. The Pandava listened as the sages described how Krishna was the unborn original personality of Godhead, appearing on earth to destroy the demoniac persons and to establish the eternal religion, pure love of God. As he traveled, Arjuna also performed fire sacrifices to please Lord Vishnu and the other gods. One evening, just as the Brahmanas were kindling the sacred fire, Arjuna entered the Ganga in order to bathe. He was just about to then leave the river when he suddenly felt himself being drawn underwater by some unseen force. Despite his best efforts to free himself, Arjuna was dragged deeply into the river. He then found himself mystically transported to a celestial palace. Arjuna looked around and saw a sacred fire burning within the room which he had entered. The prince immediately sat before the fire and offered libations of ghee into the flames, fearlessly reciting the mantras. Just as Arjuna was completing his evening rituals in that strange place, a beautiful girl entered the room. She glanced coyly at Arjuna and smiled. Arjuna recognized her at once to be a maiden belonging to the celestial Naga race. Arjuna at once understood what had happened. The Nagas have the power to transfer humans to their own heavenly dimension of existence. Obviously, this girl had become attracted to Arjuna, and so had drawn him down to her abode. Arjuna smiled back at her and spoke. "Oh, beautiful maiden, you have been bold, yes, bold indeed. Who are you, and where is this divine region?" "Oh, great hero, I am the daughter of the Naga king named Kauravya. My name is Ulupi. When you entered the river for your bath, I was moving through the waters in my ethereal form. But then I was struck by Cupid's arrow as soon as I saw your godlike form. O descendant of Kuru, as yet I remain unmarried. Therefore, accept me as your wife. Give yourself up to me and gratify me today." Arjuna replied that he was bound by a vow of celibacy for 1 year. So Arjuna could not therefore accept Ulupi as his wife. Still, as she was a Naga, Arjuna knew she must have already known this by her celestial intelligence. Ulupi would not have asked Arjuna to marry her if her request did not somehow or other conform to the codes of virtue. Indeed, the scriptures enjoined that a Kshatriya should never refuse a maiden who supplicated herself to him. "O Ulupi, how could I possibly satisfy your desire while at the same time maintain my truthfulness? Yes, I know of your vow, O hero. You and your brothers made that rule in regard to Draupadi, and this is well known to the gods. But that rule pertained only to your wife. It is her with whom you must not consort for the next year. So there will be no sin in accepting another woman. O most powerful Pandava hero, I am filled with desire for you. I beseech you to accept me. You should understand that such an act would be the highest duty under the present circumstances. I know that you will only act when impelled by virtuous motives. But hear me, if you do not take me as your wife, I will destroy myself. So, in fact, you will be saving my life by accepting me. And that is certainly a greater virtue than observing celibacy. So even if your piety suffers a slight loss by going with me, you will gain greater merits by having saved the life of this poor, helpless woman who has approached you for shelter. Arjuna thought carefully. He decided that the Naga maiden was speaking the truth, and that he would not be acting wrongly in accepting Ulupi as his wife. Arjuna smiled and nodded in assent. Quickly, Ulupi fetched 2 celestial garlands, which she and Arjuna duly exchanged, signifying their acceptance of one another. Having thus sealed their union, according to scriptural injunctions, Arjuna spent the night with her in Kauravya's palace. Ulupi waited upon Arjuna, offering him every kind of celestial food and drink. They then lay together on a golden bed in the heavenly mansion, and thus conceived a child. In the morning, Arjuna rose just before sunrise. Ulupi brought him back through the Ganga to the place where he had bathed the night before. Before leaving him, Ulupi blessed Arjuna. "You shall be invincible in water. Every aquatic creature will be vanquished by you in a fight. My dear hero, I will return to you later when you are back in your own kingdom." Suddenly, Ulupi vanished into the Ganga, leaving Arjuna to be greeted by his followers. The ascetic Brahmanas had seen by their own divine sight how the prince had been taken to the region of the Nagas. They met him as he returned and offered him their blessings. Arjuna then related to them everything that had happened. Part 2. The party continued on to the Himalayas and soon arrived at the Bhrigu mountain, where the famous Vasistha Rishi had once had his hermitage. Many Brahmanas lived on that hill, and Arjuna distributed much charity to them. After bathing in a sacred lake on the Bhrigu mountain, Arjuna kept on walking, visiting numerous other holy sites. Arjuna went towards the east, gradually descending from the Himalayan range. He reached the forest of Naimisharanya, which is said to be the very hub of the universe, according to the sages. From there, Arjuna crossed over the rivers Nanda, Upananda, and the famous Kaushika, where the great Rishi Vishvamitra had performed asceticism for thousands of years in ancient days. Desiring to increase his piety, Arjuna traveled from one pilgrimage site to another along with his retinue. He performed many sacrificial ceremonies and gave away much wealth. When Arjuna reached the border of the kingdom of Kalinga on the eastern coast, Arjuna bade farewell to most of his followers and then entered the kingdom with only a few attendants. Arjuna journeyed through forests, woodlands, and numerous towns and villages. He passed the great Mount Mahindra and arrived finally in Manipur, where he visited the king Chitravahana in his city of Manalur. The king had an attractive daughter named Chitrangada. Arjuna one day saw her in the palace gardens and was struck with desire. He approached the king asking for his daughter's hand in marriage. Chitravahana replied that he would be delighted to see his daughter married to such an illustrious heir of the Kuru race. Arjuna was famous throughout the world as a hero without equal. But the king had one condition. Years ago, his ancestors had prayed to Lord Shiva for a child. Lord Shiva granted their request, saying, "Yes, you shall have a child, and from now on, all of your descendants will have a child, but only one child, just to continue your race." So, Chitravahana had only the daughter. If Arjuna begot a son with his daughter, then Arjuna must leave the boy to become the next king of Manipur. Happily, Arjuna accepted the condition and was married to the princess with all due ceremony. Arjuna remained in the city for 3 months, and when he saw that Chitrangada had actually conceived a child, he took leave from her and the king, setting out once again on his travels. Before leaving, he promised Chitrangada that he would return and bring her to his home in Indraprastha. Arjuna then made his way south along the coast. When he reached the southern coast, he found a large community of rishis. Arjuna asked them to point out the local pilgrimage sites, and the rishis informed Arjuna that there were 5 sacred lakes in that region, but they could not be approached because they were infested with crocodiles. However, these lakes were able to confer great merits upon anyone who could actually bathe in them. But as soon as someone would enter the water, that person would be carried away by one of the powerful crocodiles. So Arjuna now saw an opportunity to serve the ascetics. Arjuna remembered the boon given to him by his wife Ulupi. Going to that lake, named after the famous rishi Agastya, who had once lived there, Arjuna dived into the water. Immediately, Arjuna's leg was seized by a great crocodile. Feeling the divine strength conferred to him by Ulupi, Arjuna grasped hold of the crocodile and pulled it out of the water. Arjuna dashed the creature onto the shore. It suddenly became limp, but all of a sudden, a beautiful celestial maiden came out of the dead body. Seeing the wonderful sight, Arjuna inquired, "Oh, who are you, most beautiful one? Why have you committed such sins in this lake, carrying away holy ascetics?" The maiden stood before Arjuna with folded palms and then spoke. "Oh, mighty hero, I am the Apsara named Varga, ever beloved of Kubera. Once I had gone with 4 of my friends to see my master Kubera. As we traveled through a heavenly woodland region, we saw a Brahmana meditating in a lonely place. He was extremely handsome, and he lit up the woods with his bodily luster. We 5 Apsaras playfully tried to disturb his meditation. We danced and sang before him, trying to tempt him away from his ascetic practices. Although unmoved by lust, the Brahmana still was angered by our behavior. He then cursed us. "Just as you attack me now without compunction or shame, You 5 shall become crocodiles whose only business will be in attacking others." At once the maidens came to their senses. Showing contrition, they begged the Brahmana for mercy. He relented and told them that they would soon be delivered from their crocodile bodies by a most powerful man. Just at that moment, the great sage Narada arrived there and told them to enter the 5 sacred lakes on the southern coast of Bharatavarsha. Soon, Arjuna would come and release them from their bondage. Apsara Varga bowed before Arjuna, thanking him for delivering her. She then asked him to save her 4 friends who lived in each of the 4 other lakes. Arjuna smiled and went quickly to each holy lake. Arjuna pulled out all the other crocodiles, and each time he watched as a maiden of shining beauty came out of the fierce reptilian body. The 5 Apsaras came together, and after offering Arjuna their respects, rose up to the heavens. Having now made the lakes safe once again, Arjuna took his leave from the rishis and proceeded on his journey. Part 3. Arjuna then traveled up the western coast until he arrived at Prabhas. In the sea near Prabhas, Lord Krishna had constructed a city called Dwaraka. Arjuna could see the splendid fortress city from a distance, shining like the sun on the horizon. It can only be reached by passing along a heavily guarded bridge. So when he reached the bridge, Arjuna sent word of his arrival to Krishna, who immediately came out of the city to see his dear friend. They embraced each other with joy. News of Arjuna's exile from Indraprastha had already reached Dwaraka, and so Krishna had been expecting him to arrive before the year was up. Krishna knew that Arjuna was interested in gaining the hand of his sister Subhadra. Arjuna had heard much about the princess from Gada, Krishna's cousin, who had studied under Drona along with the Pandavas. Gada had described Subhadra as being of incomparable beauty. Why, just by hearing the descriptions, Arjuna's heart had become attracted. He had resolved even then to somehow or other win Subhadra as his wife, and that would forge an alliance between the Pandavas and their beloved Lord Krishna. Arjuna then told Krishna about his travels to the holy places, and the Vrishni hero Krishna replied, "Yes, this is all good. Your piety and virtue are ever increasing." Arjuna turned quickly then to the subject of Subhadra. He asked Krishna how she might be won. Krishna smiled and then said, "This princess, my sister, is worthy of you in every way. But, O tiger among men, who knows what would be her decision at a Swayamvara? For a hero, the surest way to win a maiden is to carry her away by force. This is always the way of the powerful and is sanctioned by holy scripture." Krishna warned Arjuna that his brother Balaram was intent on seeing Subhadra married to Duryodhana, even though no one else in Dwaraka was very keen on this suggestion. Krishna especially did not like the idea himself. He would much rather prefer Arjuna to take the hand of Subhadra. But Balaram was the city father, and he was Krishna's elder brother. So Krishna did not want to go against the wishes of his elder brother. Krishna told Arjuna to be patient. They would devise a plan. So in the meanwhile, they could spend some time together. Arjuna still had 4 months remaining of his exile, so he could spend it with Krishna at Dwaraka. Krishna suggested that Arjuna keep his identity concealed. If he entered the city openly, he would not get a chance to even see Subhadra. She lived in Balaram's palace and was never seen in public. Her first appearance would be at her marriage. So, if Arjuna went into the city dressed as a sannyasi renunciant, Balaram would doubtlessly invite Arjuna for meals. Krishna was well aware that his elder brother was fond of entertaining ascetics and sages, and also that Balaram arranged for Subhadra to serve these persons so that she might be blessed and increase her virtue. Arjuna should therefore disguise himself as a renunciant, a member of the sannyas order. No one would recognize Arjuna if he matted his hair and kept his beard, especially if Arjuna was dressed in the saffron robes of a sannyasi. So Arjuna could live in Dwaraka during the coming months and await the opportunity to win the beautiful Subhadra. The rainy season was just now upon them, and so it was customary for wandering ascetics to stay in the city till the rains had passed. Krishna then went back into Dwaraka, and Arjuna waited a few more days outside before entering. Krishna's plan indeed sounded good. Arjuna wanted a chance to see Subhadra and also for her to see him. Being most pious, Arjuna did not want to steal her against her desire. If she were not attracted to him, Arjuna would leave her in peace. He tied his hair into a knot above his head and put on the dress of a renunciant. Taking up the triple rod staff traditionally carried by Vaishnava sannyasis, or worshippers of Lord Vishnu in the renounced order, Arjuna entered Dwaraka. The unsuspecting gatekeepers allowed this ascetic to pass, folding their palms in respect as he walked by. Arjuna made his way along the huge golden bridge which spanned the ocean to the city, and which was encrusted with precious stones. At intervals, the bridge opened out onto spacious platforms where well-armed soldiers stood guard, but none of them recognized Arjuna as he passed. When Arjuna finally reached the city gates, he was stunned by its opulence. Symmetrically arranged around the center of the city were 16,108 white palaces, one for each of Krishna's queens. Each palace was bedecked with gold and jewels, and each rivaled the celestial Mount Meru in its size and opulence. Magnificent temples rose up on all sides, and the sounds of sacred chants could be heard everywhere. Beautiful music filled the air, and billows of fragrant incense wafted on the breeze. Shining chariots and great elephants moved here and there. Attractively dressed citizens strolled about the wide avenues, which were inlaid with priceless emeralds and interspersed with gardens stocked with celestial flowers. In the midst of these delightful gardens, jeweled fountains stood in lotus-filled lakes. Trees bearing blossoms of every color stood along the roadsides. Rising up from the sea was a massive fortified wall, 100 miles long, surrounding the city. Arjuna gazed about in wonder as he made his way to the quarters where the Brahmanas resided in the city. Krishna had arranged for his friend Arjuna to be given a large house as his residence. Krishna told him that he would inform Balaram of the arrival of a Vaishnava sannyasi, and so Arjuna could expect to be soon invited to Balaram's palace where he could see Subhadra. Indeed, Arjuna felt as if he had ascended to the abode of Indra in the heavenly planets. The gods themselves were even seen frequenting Dwaraka, and so it seemed as if its residents were celebrating a never-ending festival. And just as Krishna had expected, Balaram arranged for Arjuna to be brought to his palace and was offered varieties of delicious food. Balaram had his sister Subhadra serve this sannyasi so that she might receive his blessings. The princess stole Arjuna's mind away. She was everything he had heard she was. Subhadra was as beautiful as Vishnu's divine consort Lakshmi. With her blue silk garments, gold earrings and ornaments, as well as her long curling black hair, Subhadra could capture the hearts even of the celestials. She moved about with grace and poise as she served the ascetic. Arjuna tried his best not to stare at Subhadra as he accepted the golden dishes she placed before him. But the princess caught Arjuna's glance and saw the sparkle in his eyes. Then she looked more carefully at this sannyasi. He did not resemble the other ascetics Balaram had brought to the house previously. This ascetic looked more like a prince. Beneath his thin cotton cloth, Subhadra could see his broad and powerful shoulders. As Arjuna accepted the dishes she offered, Subhadra noticed his long, well-muscled arms, which resembled a pair of five-hooded serpents. Subhadra could see that behind his beard, this young sannyasi was actually extremely handsome. His dark eyes pierced hers, and she felt her heart quiver. It was obvious that he desired her. Perhaps he was looking for a bride. Subhadra knew that Balaram was trying to arrange her marriage to Duryodhana, but the young sage seemed to be a better prospect than that conceited Kuru prince Duryodhana. Subhadra wondered who this ascetic might be. Over the coming weeks, Balaram invited Arjuna to his palace on numerous occasions. Each time, Subhadra would serve Arjuna, and their attraction for one another grew. One day, in confidence, Krishna spoke with Subhadra on the subject of her impending marriage. Subhadra told Krishna of her feelings for this strange sannyasi, and Krishna smiled. He then asked Subhadra how she felt about Duryodhana. The princess's features twisted disdainfully. Then Krishna mentioned Arjuna's name, telling Subhadra that the Pandava was desirous of becoming her husband. Indeed, he had come to Dwaraka just to seek her hand. Subhadra looked at Krishna intently. She now realized what Krishna was saying. The handsome ascetic was Arjuna. Why had she not guessed it? This so-called sannyasi, who walked like a powerful lion and spoke with a voice resembling a thundercloud, could only be a great ruler. Suddenly, Subhadra became excited. If only she could become the wife of that famous Kuru hero. But Krishna cautioned Subhadra to remain quiet about Arjuna's identity. For if Balaram learned the truth, there would be trouble. Subhadra should be patient, and Arjuna would surely find a way to marry her. It was almost the end of the monsoon season. Balaram invited the sannyasi to his palace for a final visit. Once again, Subhadra served Arjuna. By glances and smiles, Subhadra made her feelings clear to Arjuna. Arjuna's heart pounded. Why, he could hardly eat. He prayed that he would soon get the chance to take Princess Subhadra as his bride. When the meal was over, Balaram gave gold and jewels to the sannyasi and then sent him home. Arjuna left with his mind in turmoil. He had to somehow or other gain the hand of Subhadra. During the last weeks of the rainy season, Arjuna's mind remained fixed on the princess. Finally, the rains ended, and it was time for Arjuna to leave Dwaraka. Krishna came to see Arjuna, telling him that there would be a festival on Raivataka Hill, which skirted the mainline coast around Dwaraka. All of the Yadus would be attending. The beautiful Subhadra would also be there. So Krishna suggested that this might be the time for which Arjuna had been long waiting for. Arjuna's eyes lit up. Krishna was sitting next to Arjuna on the couch, and he explained his plan. "O best of men, I do not see any way how you can obtain Subhadra other than by kidnapping her from the midst of her friends and relatives. The festival will provide just the opportunity for you, as the powerful heroes of the Yadu dynasty will be at ease and not expecting any trouble." The festival was to be held in a few days, so Krishna arranged for swift messengers to ride to nearby Indraprastha. Arjuna wanted to obtain Yudhishthir's permission before snatching away Subhadra. Such an act would likely arouse the anger of the mighty Balaram and might even precipitate a fight between the Pandavas and the Yadus. But Krishna told Arjuna not to fear. Krishna himself would pacify Balaram when the time came. "Yes, I will convince my quick-tempered, irascible brother of the propriety and excellence of such an alliance with your house, O Partha. So you need only take the maiden and make off with Subhadra with all speed." When Yudhishthir's permission arrived, Arjuna prepared himself to kidnap the princess. On the day of the festival, Subhadra came out of Dwaraka surrounded by her relatives. All the great personalities of Dwaraka were present, such as King Ugrasena, Akrura, Gada, Saurabha, Babru, Satyaki, Uddhava, and many others. They resembled an assembly of the gods. Gandharvas also appeared, playing sweet celestial music as Apsaras danced. Dwaraka's citizens came out on their golden chariots and on the backs of great elephants. Above them hovered the aerial cars of the Siddhas and Charanas, uttering auspicious Vedic hymns in praise of Krishna and Balaram, who shone in the midst of the assembly like the sun and moon. And from the sky, demigods showered celestial flowers, playing their heavenly instruments. As evening approached, Arjuna came out of the city unnoticed. He had changed his dress and put on armor. His 1 year of exile was now over, and so he had cut his hair and resumed his normal appearance. Krishna met Arjuna, giving him a chariot drawn by Shaibya and Sugriva, two of Krishna's celestial horses. As the Yadus sported and enjoyed themselves in the fragrant woodlands on the Raivataka mountain, Arjuna mounted his chariot. Then he saw Subhadra, surrounded by her friends and maidservants, standing near a temple of Lord Vishnu. Without delay, Arjuna spurred the horses, rushing towards the princess. Subhadra looked up in surprise as she heard the clatter of the fast-approaching chariot. Holding the reins was Arjuna, with a great bow slung on his back and a sword hanging from his belt. Subhadra's heart jumped. The prince was heading straight for her. In less than a minute, Arjuna had taken hold of Subhadra's hand and pulled her onto the chariot. Before anyone could react, Arjuna raced away towards the north, back to Indraprastha. As they realized what had happened, the Yadus became incensed. How dare anyone kidnap their princess Subhadra before their very eyes? Who could have been so bold? Some of them said it was Arjuna from Indraprastha. The Yadu warriors ran about in all directions, trying to find their weapons and chariots. In Dwaraka, the chief officer of the court stood in the central square of the city, blowing his golden trumpet. It was a call to arms. A council of war was hastily assembled in the Yadava court. As the ministers and generals quickly took their places in the Sudharma assembly hall, Balaram spoke up. His angry voice echoed around the hall. Why has Arjuna insulted us in this way? Does he not consider us worthy of a peaceful approach? Indeed, he has stolen Subhadra without even speaking to any of us. This means war. Balaram glared around the assembly with eyes reddened with fury. Thousands of Yadu warriors present rose like so many fires, blazing up when fed with oil or ghee. They clamored about. Bring my chariot. Fetch my weapons. Yoke my chariot. I shall give chase to this insolent Pandava Arjuna. Amidst all the uproar, only Krishna remained unmoved, seated upon his beautiful, jewel-encrusted throne at the head of the assembly. Seeing this, Balaram again spoke up. With his pure white complexion, blue robes, and wildflower garlands, Balaram resembled a white mountain covered with blossoms. His voice again echoed around the hall. Stop, O senseless men! What are you doing while Krishna himself remains silent? Cease your roaring and let us hear what is on Krishna's mind before we act. Krishna's words are always our surest guide. Balaram then looked across at his younger brother. Oh, Janardhan, Arjuna is your dear friend, but it appears he has insulted us. By snatching away our sister, Arjuna has indeed placed his foot upon my head. O Govinda, how shall I bear this? Yes, I will rid the earth of all the Kurus today by myself, for I will never tolerate an insult from the Kurus even lightly. Roaring in approval, the whole assembly erupted again as Balaram spoke out. But only Krishna was smiling. As the sound died down, Krishna said, "O Yadavas, I do not feel that Arjuna has insulted us. Indeed, my feelings are that Arjuna has only enhanced our glory. Partha knows that we would never accept payment or gifts for our princess. What man on earth would ever sell his child to another? Nor would Arjuna accept Subhadra as some kind of gift, as if she were an animal. No, Arjuna has therefore selected that method, always favored by powerful heroes." The assembly hall remained silent as Krishna continued speaking. "O Yadavas, I consider an alliance with the Pandavas, and especially with Arjuna, as being most proper. Arjuna has been born in the noble Bharata race. He is the son of the illustrious Kunti from their own house. No man on earth is capable of vanquishing Arjuna in battle. He is now proceeding on my chariot, and so it will be difficult to check him. Subhadra and Arjuna are a good match. So better we send swift messengers to bring him back in peace and arrange for a proper wedding. In that way, we will avoid the disgrace of being defeated by Arjuna, and simultaneously, we will enhance the alliance forged by this marriage. After all, now there is no question of Subhadra being accepted by any other man." Having concluded his speech, Krishna looked around the assembly. Some of the Yadus voiced their doubts, but Krishna replied to them expertly. Gradually, the mood changed. The Yadu heroes looked at one another in affirmation of Krishna's cogent words. His points were good and valid. Indeed, Arjuna was the world's greatest warrior, and his dynasty were world emperors. His marriage to Subhadra was the arrangement of providence for the good of the Yadus. So immediately they sent messengers after Arjuna. He was brought back and received with all honor. Dwaraka was decked out in flags and festoons, and a great ceremony then took place. Arjuna accepted Subhadra's hand in front of the sacred fire with the blessings of the rishis. They remained in the city for a few more days. Finally, taking permission from Balaram and Krishna, Subhadra and Arjuna returned home to Indraprastha. After a year away, Arjuna longed to see his brothers once again and introduce Subhadra to them and Kunti.